Welcome everyone to day 3 of the 2020 Progressive Learning Conference hosted by Dyknow. My name is Tiara Lustig. You've probably seen me on the days previous to this. I'm a marketing manager here at Dyknow, and I'll be facilitating today's session with Chris Woods. So today is all about STEM. We've had a great conference leading up to today, really great presentations along with the keynote speaker, Tara Martin, on Monday, which was great. So I want to give you a brief overview of just why we're hosting this conference, where else you can find us, and then a little bit of expectations for what you can expect today and following the conference. So obviously, progressive learning is really coming to the forefront of education after this period of remote learning. A lot of different strategies that have been used in remote learning are being changed and implemented into the classroom going forward, whether that's hybrid, remote, or in person. So we wanted to dedicate a full week to talk about these different progressive learning styles and how you can implement them into your remote, hybrid, or in-person classroom. So we're really excited to have Chris Woods here today to talk with us about STEM. So before we jump in, just want to give you a little overview of where else you can find Dyknow. We have our Tackling Tech podcast where Brett McGrath, our VP of Marketing, is having conversations with K-12 educators and leaders in the K-12 space about technology integration, about progressive learning, and all of that stuff so that you can really learn from people who are leading the charge on all of these styles. And Chris had a great episode on that with Brett. So go ahead and check that out after the conference. We also have our blog, which we break down those conversations on the podcast, put them into really good digestible pieces that you can learn on your own time. And then we have our Tech Coach Corner YouTube series, which is essentially the same thing, but in a video form rather than written. So we take small tactical information that we talk about on the podcast and really go deeper into those in a little video that you can learn from really easily and implement that into your classroom. And then last but not least, you are obviously attending a Tech Coach Corner event today, so you are aware of our Tech Coach Corner event series, Tech Coach Con event series. And we host these events that are digital and free consistently throughout the year. So be sure to keep an eye out for the next one. We haven't announced it yet, but it'll definitely be coming up in the next month or so. We also have a few exciting offers for everyone who is attending today. So I'm going to kick it over to Brett to tell you about these offers. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiara. We are really excited for 2 special announcements today. So the first announcement is the launch of the Progressive Learning Partner Program. We have spent the last several months having conversations with unbelievably talented and bright educators from all over the country. And the common theme and thread that is woven throughout those conversations is the importance of progressive learning. We're throwing a conference today to talk about progressive learning, so we're super fired up about it. One thing we realized in this process is that we can't be the only voice sharing progressive learning stories with our audience and our network. So what we wanted to do was bring together some of the best content creators around progressive learning and make sure that we were delivering curated playlists to your inbox on a regular basis. So if you're watching this live or watching this recording, you're going to be the first to know about. As you can see, we've already got some incredible sponsors here that are going to be a part of the program, many of which are presenting here today. So thank you so much for your early support. More to come. And if there are people within your network that you're learning from that are creating a podcast or have a YouTube channel around progressive learning, send me an email at bmcgrath@dyknow.com. I'd love to reach out to them and have them be a part of the program. The second announcement is something that I am really, really excited about, and that aligns with the Dyknow product and your schools in your school's progressive learning programs. So we get a lot of questions about the Dyknow product, whether it's on the podcast or through direct messages. And so what we wanted to do was extend an offer for Dyknow. And Dyknow, just in case you don't know, Dyknow is a student device monitoring software that works in person, in remote, and in a hybrid learning environment. It helps empower teachers to passively or actively monitor devices as the autonomy between students and teachers increases with distance, blended, and all these progressive learning styles that we are talking about today. So we're extending a 30% discount on the 2021 school year for anyone who signs up for that. So you can follow the link to learn more about that. This offer will expire on November 13th, so you'll need to get signed up by November 13th. But if you have any questions, again, you can reach out to me at bmcgrath@dyknow.com. Make sure you get those answered. Without further ado, I'll kick it back over to you, Tiara.
Brett, let's go ahead and get started with some event expectations, schedule, and then jump into Chris's presentation. So what you can expect for the week of the conference, you've heard it before, but I just want to give you an overview again. Yesterday, we had a great presentation from Jill Thompson on personalized learning. Today, like I said, we're talking all about STEM with Chris Woods. Tomorrow, we have our flipped learning session with the Treefish EDU guys. Those are Eric Geis, Kyle Nemus, and Nick Johnson. And then on Friday, we have PBL, SEL, and Equity with George Valenzuela. So great lineup of sessions. We hope you can join us for all of them. Like we said in the email before, all of these sessions will be available at noon every single day, and we'll send you a link at the beginning of the day so that you can watch them on your own time. We understand that time is precious this time of year, so we don't want to expect you to sit down for a live conference. And then what you can expect today for the breakout session, obviously you are watching a recording right now that was made available to you. If you did not have a chance to register and watch the recording during the day, or you have colleagues who may want to watch the recordings afterwards, these will all be available on our YouTube channel the Monday following the conference, so on 9/28, and you will receive an email with those sessions so that you can access them. We also are trying to get as much of the live conference experience as possible, even though these are pre-recorded. So we'll be hosting Twitter chats at noon and 4 p.m. every day to align with the conference presentation that's happening that day. So today, join us at noon and at 4 p.m. for a great Twitter chat on STEM that'll last for about 30 to 40 minutes with some questions and prompts that we pull from Chris's presentation. And that will be happening in the hashtag #DyknowPLC. So if you can't join us for those Twitter chats, highly encourage you to just engage with that hashtag. Let us know what questions you have. Let us know what your thoughts are, how you're feeling about the conference. We'd love to hear everything. And we love to see that engagement in that Twitter chat during the conference. So that's really exciting. And then last but not least, I'm sure everyone attending today is hoping to get professional development credit for attending the session. So we will be providing a certificate of attendance along with that email that will have your session recordings in it on Monday, 9/28. So that will be a self-reported certificate where you can check off which sessions you attended and provide the total number of hours that you got of PD credit. So if you need additional confirmation that you did attend those sessions, I can provide that. Just reply to that certificate of attendance email or email me directly at tlustig@dyknow.com. All right, I think that's all I have to cover today. Let's jump into the session. So like I said, today we are talking all about STEM with Chris Woods, and Chris will be presenting on STEM in a remote learning world. So Chris, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and pass it off to you. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Tiara. I'm so excited. It really is neat how you've created this conference, and I think so many educators are starting to realize that it's not the same world that we live in right now. And so having these kind of opportunities, so big thanks to Dyknow for providing this. And again, follow along or share your ideas on Twitter, hashtag #DyknowPLC. That's at the bottom of every page on my slide, just to remind you, because this learning never stops for us as educators. And if we can continue to learn, that means we can continue to get better each and every day to help even more kids in better ways. I'm so excited. I get to talk with you about STEM and a remote learning world. I definitely want to encourage you to check out the next sessions this week. I've talked with Kyle in the past, and I know just what an incredible educator he is, coming on Thursday. And Friday, George Valenzuela is one of my favorites, one of my good friends, and he's got so many great ideas that are very practical to help you, especially in this remote learning world. I'm probably going to take a little more of a really look at how can we make STEM connect to that remote learning world, especially just with a bunch of ideas, and just make it just some good ideas to help you. Not so much necessarily like these specific kinds of tools, but just give you that overview, that idea that we don't have to be in a classroom to be doing STEM. In fact, my mind always thinks about STEM. And it looks like let's see, I need to be able to Let's see, here we go. All right, and my mind just naturally sees STEM in that world around us. My mind notices those kind of things, just like whatever kind of subject that you teach, you probably notice those kinds of things in your world each and every day. In fact, I even see it when the kids are eating their school lunch in the cafeteria. I'm looking and I see triangles, I see circles, I see sections of a circle. And I love pointing those things out to my kids because that's where STEM really makes that connection, when it's part of our everyday lives, not just a part of some fancy kits that we have or a STEM class we go to once a week. I love sharing all those kinds of ideas on all my social media. You can find me at Daily STEM on all of them because I love connecting with educators and giving them ideas that maybe things, because maybe their brain doesn't notice all those STEM things kind of like the way that my brain does. And again, places like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook are so great for educators to be able to share. It's like the best virtual teacher's lounge anywhere. You can find all sorts of great ideas, and everybody's so willing to share or ask questions and things like that. In fact, after I've been sharing for so many years, it's really pretty incredible. I actually got to write a book. It just came out in September. And just pretty amazing that a math teacher can actually write a book. I just got to say that that's just so amazing to me. But it really happens all because I'm willing to step out of my comfort zone a little bit, just like any educator needs to be willing to step out of their comfort zone as well. But the big question I want us to think about today is, how do we do STEM in a remote learning world? Because I think we think of STEM as being, you know, a bunch of coding and robots and rockets, and we might not always have all those kinds of materials in every single home for our kids to be able to do. And so we have a lot of questions and we love ideas. Again, there's so many ideas out there. I'm going to share a bunch of ideas with you today. And normally when I present, I love to be challenging. I love to get people thinking differently, especially thinking differently about STEM. I love for it to be fast paced. So the fact that I have 100+ slides and we're only going to do that in about 30 minutes, don't worry, it'll happen. I'm not going to bore you to death. We're going to have a great time. We're going to go through these things. And again, you can always ask questions by finding me on social media or at dailystem.com. I normally love to be interactive, so it's always tough to have to connect virtually like this, but if you get the opportunity to be in that Twitter chat, or again, find online, we can help with that. And there will be a question and answer time at the end. Hopefully we can maybe get some other questions and ideas going. Tiara will be asking me some questions, and maybe I'll ask Tiara some questions too and see what she thinks about STEM. But the big thing that I love to ask, and I think we all need to consider, is why do kids like STEM so much? Kids are naturally gravitating towards STEM things. Anytime we say, hey kids, it's time for STEM, they're excited. And I think that's also a hindrance too, because if we say, hey, it's time for STEM, and then now it's not time for STEM, they start to turn off maybe to some things. And we want to engage them all the time. But kids love STEM because they can make a mess, because they can do things with their hands, they can be creative. In fact, it's almost like being a kid again. And we all like to be a kid and be able to make messes and do things with our hands and just be a little bit creative. But STEM really does have the power to get kids excited about learning, especially with that creativity and curiosity that's so naturally present in a child. It has the ability to build soft skills, those communication and confidence things that we really need our kids to have besides just that classroom learning. It has the ability to enhance what we're already doing in our classroom through collaboration, or even collaborating with other teachers in your school and in your educational context. And it also helps to prepare kids for any kind of future, especially with that critical thinking piece. And again, you might notice that I threw those 4 C's that are common in education right in there. And we'll talk about those again in a minute. But I really want us to remember that STEM is not just for the gifted kids in our class. It's not just for the really smart kids. It's not just for the kids that have access to robots at home. It is for every kid, in every classroom, in every home, every day. And if we can bring STEM to every kid, if we can find ways to be creative to do that, then you know what? We are leveling the playing field for every kid. We're providing that opportunity that every kid needs and every kid deserves to be the best kid and then grow into the best adult, best citizen that they can be. You know, kids are naturally wondering and creating and love to see that amazingness in their world. And we want to provide those opportunities. And we might not have cool explosions all the time, but we can find STEM everywhere we go. Whether we're buying paper towels or toilet paper at the store or parking somewhere, there is examples of STEM everywhere we go. And the best way that we can bring STEM into every opportunity for every kid is by starting to notice that. And again, it requires wonder. We want our kids to notice and be amazed at the amazing things that STEM does in our world and innovates in our world. And I love the movie Big Hero 6, and I say that all the time when I present. Educators, if you've never seen Big Hero 6, it's the perfect movie to remind you of the wonder of a kid and then the desire to do great things. Definitely check out Big Hero 6 if you haven't. And again, the best resources are really all around us. Thomas Edison said, to invent, you need a good imagination and a pile of junk. Well, guess what? Every one of our kids at their home has resources like that. Anything, something that they can use. And again, we'll talk about some of those specific ideas in a bit. We talk about creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking, those 4 C's. Well, guess what? Those are really part of STEM. In fact, that's kind of, those 4 C's are kind of how we teach the 2 C's, the curriculum and the content. STEM is really taught by using those 4 C's to get to the 2 C's. We need to find ways to use creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking to help kids understand that curriculum and content. And likewise, if we're not building on a foundation of curriculum and content, we can do every STEM project that we ever see online, and it's not going to make a difference for those kids because they're just going to learn how to make projects and crafts and things like that. But it's also important that we find ways to make STEM, again, work for every single kid. And that might mean bringing some artistic aspects, some nature aspects in, or just, again, any types of materials that we can find to make STEM opportunities for every kid. Again, we all know that our learning situations are different, so I want you to think about your context, where you're teaching. And again, you, like Tiara said, you might be 100% virtual, you might be some hybrid, or you might be back in a classroom, but still dealing with situations that you have to keep in mind to prevent illnesses and things like that, or going forward, future years. We don't even know what things are going to look like, but every learning situation will always be different, and we can always find a way to bring STEM into that learning context. It's not a magic answer, okay? STEM, PBL, STEAM, design thinking, whatever you want to call it. It's not the magic answer to education. What we really need is just to make that education relevant for our kids. And I think of the different ways that different schools are using and building STEM classes already. Some people do once per week. Some people do all 5 days in a week, and then they go off for a few weeks. Some schools do a STEM for a whole elective, a whole marking period or semester. And other schools are doing it where they don't have a STEM class, but they integrate pieces, or the STEM teacher comes into different classrooms. However you're doing STEM that works good for your school is the right way to do STEM in your school. But consistently think about what's the best way and can we do it better? And my real goal is eventually to get rid of the point where we even have STEM class at all. So we can say every teacher is an art teacher and a history teacher and a literacy teacher and a STEM teacher, because when every teacher is starting to think about how do I have every aspect of learning in my classroom, that's when kids realize that it's not just a bunch of randomly created subjects that we've constructed in education, but it's actually learning. It's actually learning about the world and how do we live in that world and how do we work in that world and all those things like that. STEM is not a class you teach, it's a culture that you build. You can build it in your classroom, you can build it in your community. And both of those parts are very important. We're going to talk about both of those today. So how can we actually build that culture of STEM learning, especially in a remote learning world? Well, it starts with just noticing the things that are around us. And again, in my mind, things like that, when I see a Pixar movie, I'm seeing all the types of science and technology, engineering and math that go into creating everything that's on the screen. When I'm watching Phineas and Ferb with my kids, which is a great STEM show, by the way. And if you haven't thought about using a Phineas and Ferb episode in your classroom, do it, because it involves all sorts of creating these wonderful characters who love to just use their imaginations. What are we going to do today, Ferb? I mean, what a great idea for a classroom. What if you could walk into your classroom every day and say, what are we going to do today, kids? And have them be as excited as those characters are. And maybe you just have some opportunities to get some types of materials and bring those in your classroom. And this is a Bloxel set, but guess what? You don't have to have the app to run it, or you don't have to have anything like that. You can just have little kids even putting them into patterns, making pictures. Use and think about your resource that you have and ways to make learning come alive for those kids. One day in my classroom, and it was just kind of a random question, and I asked the kids, what do you think is going to fall faster? A piece of paper that's crumpled up or a piece of paper that's flat? And they all figured out that, of course, because of air resistance, that the crumpled up paper is going to fall faster. But I said, so what if I fold it into a paper airplane? Would it fall faster than the crumpled up one? And they started thinking and they started sharing ideas. And so we tried it and I dropped them. And it was kind of hard to tell because it was so fast, so close. But they knew that maybe if we slowed it down. So I handed my phone with a slow-mo app on the camera, and I had one of my students hold it and record it, and then we popped it up on the screen, and we found out that paper airplane fell a little bit faster. And it didn't take a lot. It took the phone in my pocket, and it took 2 pieces of paper, 2 pieces of scrap paper, actually. They were old worksheets that I cut up. That's the kind of STEM that we can be doing in our classroom every day. In fact, STEM learning happens when questions are encouraged. Ask questions in your classroom, not just those yes/no questions that we learned in educational circles that were not the best kind of questions in our classroom, but what really does 6 feet mean? We live in this social distance world where 6 feet or 2 meters is magical. We stay that far apart, but what does 6 feet actually mean? Well, I came up with some ideas to have my students try. How far is that in water bottles? How far is that in fruit, cereal boxes, whatever? And you know what? That becomes a connection to units. When we talk about feet or meters, we're talking about a unit, but we could just as easily be talking about cereal boxes or water bottles as a unit, as a distance. And then you can connect those real life things to something that's part of your content and your curriculum. One day in class, we were talking about different shapes that tile and fit together. And I asked my kids, how many pennies do you think it would take to tile the floor? Actually, I didn't say how many pennies. I said, could we tile the floor with pennies? Because if I had asked it as how many pennies tile the floor, then it would just be, let's find the answer, turn it in, we're done. If I asked, could we tile the floor with pennies? Now it's, well, is it possible? A, how many would it take? B, how would we actually place all those? How long would it take? You start figuring in all these different types of things. How could you glue them down? Would there be gaps in between? Would it be terrible to have to sweep the floor if there was a bunch of pennies stuck to the floor? Would people try to pick them up? Would it cost more if we use quarters? Would it cost more if we use nickels or dimes or all those types of things? But it was a question and it got my kids thinking. And no, we didn't have enough pennies to do the whole floor. But we could figure out a pretty good estimate just by having the kids figure out how many it would take to do a square foot and then figuring out the square feet of the room. And then we got to keep, again, thinking through. And it didn't start from just random things. It just started from a question. Like for me, I love throwing a picture from under a microscope. I hold my camera on my phone up to my microscope lens and I snap a picture and I'll put that on the screen and I'll say, hey kids, can you tell me what this is? Can you guess what this is? It doesn't require a lot of thought. It doesn't require a lot of even figuring things out ahead of time, but it sometimes is just enough to spark some interest in some kids, get them going and interested in thinking for a couple minutes, and then we can move on to maybe other parts of the lesson, or like the pennies question, it can connect to something that we're doing currently in a particular subject or a class. Now, by the way, if you're wondering, that's a butterfly, an acorn, and a penny, just in case you were thinking. But again, we don't want to just give our kids activities and crafts. We want to really start to build in curriculum-based projects, and we want to make them authentic, not just let's give them a craft and do it. Everybody replicate this, hand it in. because that's not what STEM is either. It's all right sometimes if we copy somebody else's project that we see online, but we need to be willing to change it and then eventually create our own that really fit to our kids' interests and our kids' ideas as well. STEM learning happens when lessons include relevance and the real world. It's not going to happen if it's something, even if you can come up with the greatest robots and rockets assignment you can, if it doesn't connect with the kids that you're working with, if it's not relevant to their lives or their interests, they're still not going to be excited. And you might say, what? They're not interested in robots or rockets or 3D printing? They might not be. You have to find ways to connect it to the real world. If you have wind turbines in your area, what a great question. Hey kids, what do you notice about this? What kind of things do you think about when you see a wind turbine? Would these work all the time? When are they not going to work? How do you store all that energy? You know, there's so many things. What do you do when they break? What do you do with all the parts? There's so many things. Or you could ask a kid, why do pancakes always turn out in circles when you put the batter on the pan? Great question. And it can connect to so many different things. But if we start asking simple, good questions, we're going to get our kids thinking and starting to notice, to the point where they're going to start pointing out STEM in their real worlds as well. They're going to start to feel more creative. They're going to start to be inspired, and they're going to have that wonder again, instead of just curriculum and instruction and worksheets that we show them every day. Like one kid in my classroom one day said, Mr. Woods, could we find the area of a Dorito? And I said, maybe we can. Could we? And of course, that kid the next day showed up with some Doritos and figured it out because they wanted to know. It was of interest to them. It was relevant to them. You can bring in a box of alphabet cereal or any kind of cereal and ask a question like, hey, are all the letters equally divided in the box? You can ask your kids, like I asked my students just a couple days ago, have you ever even seen a 3D printer? Have you heard about 3D printers? And some of them had and some of them haven't. So I just started showing some pictures, and then they started asking questions. That's the best part, when the kids start asking the questions back, like, could you print this? Could you make that? And then I throw out questions like, could you 3D print a house? Which there are companies that are doing it using concrete. Could you 3D print food? Would you want to eat food that's 3D printed? You know, there's some companies that 3D print with chocolate. You know, I don't know. Could you 3D print loaded dice? I saw that one time. That's a really cool idea if you want to teach the infill, how much you fill something. Don't teach your kids to cheat, but you could do some pretty cool things by creating some loaded dice. But again, it's all about sharing ideas and getting kids thinking and questions. What could you build with? What could you make out of? I posted it on Twitter one day. What could you make out of that ring off of the milk jug cap? And a bunch of teachers started sharing things that their kids were making, because every kid had a milk jug ring at home. They could make something out of it. I love when I come across YouTube videos that I want to share with my kids. I throw it in a YouTube playlist. If you've never done that or created a playlist, it's real simple to do. Right near the bottom, underneath any video, there's a little 3 lines and then a plus, and you can save that. You can create all types of playlists, and I create playlists for every type of thing that either connects to my different lessons or ideas that could really inspire or engage, like STEM jobs. I have a playlist of, so that I can show my kids interesting jobs that might be part of their future. Or if I find some fun videos like Joseph's Machines, if you haven't checked those out, great Rube Goldberg type machines, such a fun example. And again, those are kind of things you can use in little bits in your classroom too, to engage and spark some more interest. Kids will get to learn STEM when they're problem solving. Sometimes we're looking, even especially right now, where we look and we see all the problems and limitations and restrictions that we have, and can be a bad thing. But guess what? They can also be the opportunities for creativity and problem solving. One of the best scenes of movies of all time, I believe, is the scene in Apollo 13, which is a real situation where they had to make the square filter fit into the round hole. And you could show just a clip of a movie and inspire your kids. Or you can say, hey, what kind of materials do you have in your home that could solve this problem, that could fix this problem? And sometimes just those little things where you have some limitations can result in some of the best creativity and problem solving. If you've ever heard of PBL, and if you haven't, check it out. but there are 7 great elements of good PBL. There needs to be a good problem, sustained inquiry, authenticity, student voice and choice, reflection, critique and revision, and then there needs to be a public product. If you haven't ever looked up those different things, definitely check out PBL Works to find out more about that when you start creating projects, so that they don't just become something that you do, something that the kid hands in, and then they're done. Again, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be something that they can demonstrate to the world, something that they've created, again, to solve a problem. My kids, I love challenging them with little problems, even something like creating shoes out of paper and cardboard, not just for something to do and to turn in, but to say, hey, look, I made this. These are some different ideas. Of course, for me, it was a way to connect 2D and 3D area and surface area and volume, but it was a great way to connect all that learning and to help kids realize that there's an incredible amount of design work that goes into even just something as exciting to them as shoes. My favorite part of the Mythbusters shows is when at the beginning they would draw their ideas out. And I think that's also a spot that we often miss in STEM and different projects, where we don't get kids to stop and think about what do they need to draw ahead of time to think about before they actually make something. They can solve a lot of problems, especially if they spend a little more time on the front end to make the back end, their creation, their design, their product, their prototype work better. It's always good, especially even to have a little notebook or have a lot of paper available, or if a kid is at home, make sure they even have just a simple notebook. They don't always cost that much, but just something where they can write down some ideas. If you've ever seen isometric drawings, these are a great way to get kids to draw and think about 2D and 3D. It basically uses the idea of like little blocks and these dots that kind of almost make it look like Minecraft. I know kids kind of like that Minecraft thing. This might be an interesting idea. Look it up if you need some ideas. Or again, check with me. I'm happy to help point you to some resources as well for all these things. Anamorphic drawings are these drawings that look like they're 3D, but they're really just drawn 2D. And there's a ton of great videos and examples, how-to drawings on YouTube. Again, I look for those and I find those and then I share them with my students, especially if we got 5-10 minutes. And these are something that kids could do from home as well. All it takes is paper, pencil, and a ruler or a straight edge. Again, real simple things. There's real data all around us, and your kids might not have the water bottle filler at home like they might at your school, but they could still keep track of the weather. They could keep track of how some plant is growing, or even the grass in their yard, or how much rain they get, or whatever types of interests or sports, keeping track even of their highest score on a video game that they're playing. If we can connect some of those things to real life, it doesn't require a lot of resources. Again, it's just making STEM relevant no matter where a kid is. If you've never seen the Literati app, I just gotta encourage you to check it out, because it's basically you take the app, you snap a picture of some trash you find on the ground, you pick up that trash, you dispose of it or recycle it properly, but the camera tags the location, and then you can actually tell the object, the material, the brand, and basically you get to help crowdsource cleaning the earth. What a huge, amazing thing that is, if you kids can be involved in something like that. And they have some new resources available on their education part of their website to be able to check out some resources there. Because you know what? It is very satisfying to pick up garbage when you find it and throw it away and be part of solving a big problem like trash and litter. We're gonna keep on going. There's a few more ideas here I wanna share with you. TED Ed also, you may have seen TED videos. Well, there are also TED Ed videos, and TED Ed also has some great units and lessons. You can create your own lessons. You can modify existing lessons. They recently made an Earth School, and they just released an Altogether Cleanup, both targeting picking up and cleanup and trash, and actually that Altogether Cleanup links with the Literati app. But STEM learning happens when we're leveraging kids' interests to ignite passions. Kids are interested in superheroes. Find ways to use those superheroes in your classroom. Connect it to whatever technology you can think of. Have them create cardboard versions of their favorite superheroes. Look for interesting books that connect reading if the kids love to read. If they love Star Wars, but they don't love Shakespeare, check out the Shakespeare versions of Star Wars. My daughter loved them, and they are a great way to interest a kid in Shakespeare language just by using a little bit of interest of Star Wars. In fact, I believe every teacher should have a classroom library. I have a classroom library. It's little, it's small, it's right in the back of my classroom, but it's got books that connect to my subject. And again, we need to all be showing kids that we are all readers, because that also helps them to realize that we're not just one-dimensional subject kind of people. We are all literacy teachers. We are all STEM teachers. We are all art teachers. As you probably noticed, there's a lot of art in a lot of these things that I've been sharing. Jarrett Lerner is a great resource if you're looking for some comic ideas that can connect with STEM as well. And STEM and music, I tell you what, there are so many incredible resources out there, including Google's Chrome Music Lab, which is great for basically kids of all ages. And if you've ever seen the band OK Go, they make some incredible music videos. Well, they show the STEM, the science, the math behind what it took to create some of their amazing videos. And check out OK Go Sandbox to find out about that. STEM interests. If you've never heard of EverFi, they have some free resources about social emotional learning. They even connect STEM and like hockey. They connect financial and education, but there's so many types of websites out there. Horse Lovers Math has bunches of free resources if your kids like horses. Magistra Roy, so that's Natalie Roy on Twitter. She shares the ways that she connects Roman technology, ancient Roman technology with STEM today. There are so many ideas and resources out there. And again, don't just find those connections, but also think about how do they play into careers. And Erin Twomley wrote a great book. It's got 26 women of all sorts of diverse backgrounds doing amazing different types of careers. I just got to suggest that book because it is incredible, the different types of careers that are available. Your kids might think that STEM careers are all wearing a lab coat and having long white hair or teaching math or science in a school. Guess what? It's not. It's so much more than that. STEM learning happens when it is part of home life. We don't want to just be content deliverers like we're some Amazon truck. Okay, we need to share content with our kids. We need to share resources that parents can use and not just deliver, drop off, and say, you know, thanks. We really want to be able to find ways to connect and engage. On my website at dailystem.com, I've made these giant lists that can help educators have some great ideas. Just very simple things they can do, like make a butterfly garden in your backyard, or invent a toy for your pet, or freeze a toy in some water and then make a time lapse of it melting, or pick up some things in the yard, or go for a walk and count how many animals or how many types of birds or how many types of trees you saw. There's so many simple little things you can do. Also on my website, I make a once a week daily newspaper that has STEM connections. Again, these are just free things because I think all educators realize that the more things we can get for free, the better off we are. It just helps stretch all those budgets that we have just a little bit further. One of the first things that I realized when we were going to remote learning last year was that we couldn't return our pop cans to the store or for some types of recycling. So I asked my kids, what would be a way to deal with all those returnables? And I got them to all share their ideas, share a short video, and I compiled them all. It doesn't have to be complicated to add STEM to our classroom. Again, we can have kids use the Literati app while taking a walk with their families. They can use the PHET simulations. If you've seen those, they're simple ways to do a lab, even if they're at home, just by logging onto the internet. And they're all free. There's so many things like that. We sometimes think that kids can't understand how to use technology, but we know they can, because they can use social media, and they can use TikTok, and they can use all those types of things. But we need to encourage them to use the technology that they have for good and learning and educational opportunities. Those best resources can be right at home. We just have to learn to make do with what we've got. And there are so many opportunities for that. Kids have Legos at home. Use the Legos for a maze or stop motion scenery or patterns and coding. Kids have movies at home. Watch those movies. Watch WALL-E and think about all the different science and technology, engineering and math that they see in a movie like WALL-E. They have, most of them have phones or devices that can make a time lapse or a stop motion video. Get them to think about how to use that at home. Kids have games sitting around that they probably don't play anymore. Encourage them to play with cards and board games. I've brought games into my classroom, and high schoolers turn into kids all over again when they get to actually play games that they played as kids. They realize, oh yeah, Connect 4 and Battleship and Checkers are actually really fun. And guess what? There's a lot of stealth learning going on. Or have the kids make their own game. Recycle all those pieces that they have in the closet at home that don't have a box. And there's so many ways to use cardboard. I can't even recommend enough. Check out Daryl Wakelam's Art Jump Site website. He's made some creative and amazing projects throughout the remote learning time. Instructables, if you ever need to know how to make something or have your kids make something, check out instructables.com. There's step-by-step tutorials to make stuff. You can even have your kids make a tutorial. A great way to promote some literacy and writing and thinking through step-by-step. Tinkercad is another great website that allows kids to create three-dimensionally on a screen, free. Again, doesn't require lots of resources, doesn't require big amounts of money. Again, we want to make things easy for our kids. I also have a bunch more links on my website of just ones that I've collected. Easy simulation ones, like a spirograph. Remember the spirograph when you were a kid, and those gears, they would like kind of roll around and make those really cool shapes? Guess what? There's an easy online one you can use. You can simulate B-bots. You can simulate all sorts of different things. You can get kids interviewing grandparents and uncles and aunts using StoryCorps. There's so many different types of free resources out there. We need to get parents to be willing, though, to try to do some of those things with their kids, because we tell them to read with their kids. We should be telling them to do STEM with their kids as well. And it might just involve stories or trips or exploring or making simple ways to just find that STEM that's around them in the world. To wrap up, I want to just tell one quick story, and then we're going to get into some questions with Tiara. One day my daughter was driving and the battery went dead, and she had to get a jump, and I realized, okay, I got to pick up a new battery on my way home. So I got home, it's dark out, but we needed to change that battery. But I wasn't going to change it this time. My daughter was going to change it, because I knew that she could do it. Now, she had never changed a battery, but I kind of walked her through it step by step. I made her do all the different steps. She cleaned the terminals, she took the old battery out, put the new one in, and connected it all together. And that day, my daughter didn't just learn how to change a battery, she learned that she had all the abilities already necessary to change a battery. Our kids have so many incredible abilities already. We just have to be willing to help them bring those skills out. However we do it, whatever resources we have, whatever those resources the kids have at home. STEM is not just finding a grant to get a bunch of really cool, shiny equipment to use in your school. STEM is all around us each and every day. Hopefully you've seen some of those examples and ways throughout some of this stuff that I've been able to share with you. But we must create a culture of STEM in our classrooms and communities. Otherwise, STEM is just going to be another buzzword that we use for a while in education, and then we're done with. And you know what? That's not what it's going to be, because our world right now is running on STEM. We need to find ways to bring it into our classroom and find the STEM that's already in our classroom and make that learning relevant to our kids each and every day. We are all here to help. Dyknow is here to help. I'm here to help. You can find us on everywhere. But I'm so excited, Tiara, that we get to also jump into some questions, and hopefully we can have some more good chatting going on as well.
Yes, definitely. I think all of the information you shared, I saw your tweet before your presentation and you had a ton of slides, but I think the amount of information and pictures that you shared are so impactful for just seeing where STEM can show up everywhere. And I love what you said at the end, like students, they really have all the skills they need to do STEM. And I would take that one step further, which you said earlier, that every teacher, regardless of what you teach, also has the abilities to teach STEM. And I think that's so important. So bridging off of that, I would love to start with a question around culture. So we've had a lot of conversations with educators around culture. I think culture is really important right now, especially with the challenges that remote learning has presented. And what I've learned is, culture, especially in schools, has to start from little pockets and then bridge out into the rest of the school or the district. So what would your recommendation be, or kind of what's your take on starting those pockets of STEM culture within maybe the different departments that aren't traditionally thought of as including STEM?
Yeah, great question, Tiara. In fact, it's something that's a big chunk in my book, and I'm not just trying to sell my book. I just mean to say that because I've already thought about this question, because it's such a big challenge. Like, how do we go from not being a STEM school where maybe like there's just a couple of people doing some STEMmy type things in our school to being that STEM culture? Number one, we got to find those teachers that are already those STEM leaders in our school. So find them and learn what you can from them. Steal their ideas. Say, hey, can I come in and watch you for a little bit? Can you do a lesson together with me? But step number two is be willing to try, educators. Find a project that you can do with your kids. And it doesn't have to be complicated like a lot of the things that I've shown you today. They don't have to be complicated. But just try something. And the more of them that you try, make a goal for yourself. Say, every month I'm going to try one. Every week I'm going to try something extra. Maybe I'm just going to show a video that I find that's got a cool STEM connection. Like you're scrolling through your Facebook or Instagram and you see something really cool. Share that with your kids. Bookmark it. Put it on a playlist that you can share with your kids. But start small. And then as you go, it's going to start to build. It's going to start to snowball. Share ideas when you're having your staff meetings. Look for other ideas. But again, also take opportunities to have the school social media account, post pictures of things you're doing in your classroom, because then that's going to reflect out to your parents and say, oh, look, they're doing some cool things in their classroom, and suggest ideas for parents as well. That's really the final step where you really get the parents in the community involved. Share an idea in your weekly newsletter. Say, hey, we've been learning about this. Here's an idea that you could do with your kids at home, just to demonstrate evaporation or to demonstrate condensation. Just setting a cold glass of ice water on the counter and seeing what happens.
Those are great recommendations. I think getting parents involved is really important, especially during this remote learning time. So I'd love to bridge into that a little bit as well. Yeah. You mentioned, STEM it is activities and crafts that are a big part of it, but it's bridging that into kind of the curriculum and making it more valuable than just an activity. How would you say parents can help kind of bridge that gap at home in a remote learning environment, or even when, on the weekends, if they're out for a hike, finding STEM in the wilderness, how can parents really help bridge that between being just an activity and finding STEM to then kind of bridging it into curriculum and making it a larger kind of lesson and idea?
Yeah, great question, Tiara. I think number one, if you're going to do that, it's going to have to start a little bit with if your educators know what kind of things you're doing. If you know, like, hey, our topics for this marking period are going to include this, and this. These science topics, maybe these reading connections. And as much as you can share those kinds of things, and it can just be very surface level. You could say, we're going to talk about erosion. Great. So then when a parent goes out, and you can maybe say, here's a couple of suggestions of things you could do. But when a parent goes for a walk with their kids and they notice some example of erosion, they can say, hey, look at that. That looks weird. How did that happen? Have you been learning anything about this kind of erosion in your class? And again, bringing that questioning process back in. And then you can bring in the problem solving aspect. You can say, hey, I see some erosion here. Is there something we could do to prevent that erosion from happening? Maybe on a trail that you're walking through. I mean, they might not, maybe the trail people in your town won't like it if you're starting to rearrange things, but even if you just put a stick there or a broken down tree branch or a limb or something, that's going to help to prevent some of that water from flowing so fast in an area. And instantly, then you take that walk a week later or a couple weeks later after a big storm, and you might notice that it looks the same. It didn't get worse. But a lot of it's going to come also from parents starting to become confident. And they might not feel confident because they think that STEM is rocket science too. So helping them maybe just by sharing some ideas. Hey, this week, here's a couple of ideas. Next week, here's a couple of ideas. Make a mini golf course in your house. Use some cardboard boxes to create what you think a robot in the future is going to look like. I mean, just anything. It doesn't have to be complicated. Use the recyclables that you have in your house to make some cool invention.
Yeah, I love your take on STEM and really breaking down the kind of, not stigma, but the idea that STEM is this really complex, sort of curriculum that needs all of this expensive and fancy technology when really it is everywhere. And I think your kind of idea on that is just so impactful and really is, I think, what will drive STEM into every part of the classroom and every subject matter. So one last question, kind of to do with students and remote learning with STEM. I feel like collaboration is a huge part of STEM, and you talked about it a lot in your presentation. How do you kind of get students to get that benefit of collaboration when they might be in a remote or hybrid environment where they all can't be in the classroom together working hands-on on an activity, or if they are in the classroom, they can't interact like they normally would be able to? What are your suggestions, or kind of what have you found with mitigating that now that we're in this kind of new age of education?
Yeah, and that is, it's always going to be a little bit tricky. Again, you're always going to have the limitations of some kids having access to resources and some kids not. So first of all, if your school has provided devices, or the kids do have devices where they are connecting in virtually, that means they probably have the ability to use maybe some things like some Google Docs or Google Sheets to be able to collaborate on something. You could have every kid go in their yard and count how many different types of trees that they have and birds that they see. And you can have one Google Sheet that you make where one column is trees, birds, animals, squirrels. I mean, whatever it is, it could be any type of thing, whatever connects with your community, your neighborhoods and things like that, or even how much trash do you see in your street on a walk for 15 minutes. So there's always things you can do like that, where that collaboration piece is perfect on a shared document. But you can also get kids to collaborate just by having them use whatever materials that they have in their home. So every kid may not have all the exact same types of, maybe some kids have pipe cleaners, but some kids have random old piece of wire, and some kids may have some other like zip ties or something. And all three of those kids can still create something using those kinds of similar materials. And you give them some limitations. You give them some, qualifications. You have to build this that does that, but use whatever you can find in your home. So you can, then the kids come back and show in whatever type of video virtual environment you have, and say, okay, this is how I created it using what I had. Well, this is how I created it using what I had. And instantly then you start to have that collaboration piece where the kids can compare how theirs ended up so much different based on the supplies they had. Again, if there was a different pile of supplies that in Apollo 13 that they dumped out and had to use to create that square filter into the round hole, it would have been something completely different. But that's what they had available, stuck on their ship. They were the ultimate remote learning opportunity.
It's a great example. And I have to ask just one last question to close this out. If you could recommend one movie for STEM for people to watch this weekend, what would it be?
It'd be Big Hero 6. It's incredible. It's got wonder. It's got all different types of characters. It's got teamwork. It's got problem solving. It's got failure too before that success at the end. And it's also got the kid who's a little bit worried about being a nerd and going to the nerd lab. And we need to reclaim that word nerd to make it a good thing, something to be proud of. Bookworms and nerds, let's unite. Let's take over this world with our great hardworking skills that go along with those words.
Definitely. Well, I think that's the perfect way to close this out. Chris, thank you so much for all of your great information on STEM. You are so passionate about STEM, so we appreciate you taking the time to share that with everyone for the conference. Once again, everyone who's watching this, Don't forget to put your questions in the Dyknow PLC hashtag and tag Chris at Daily STEM so he can answer all of your STEM questions. Chris, I know you're super active and you love answering those STEM questions, so we'll be sure to get you those. And then also, everyone, don't forget to join our sessions tomorrow and on Friday on flipped learning and SEL and PBL. We can't wait to have you there. So once again, Chris, thank you so much for being with us today.
No problem, Tierra. It was great. And keep up the good work, everybody. Educators, you are the real superheroes.
Yes, 100%.